The most powerful army on earth had one mission: find the treasures of God and take them. They did not just loot a building, they smashed the pillars that marked the entrance to heaven. They broke apart a bronze sea that weighed more than a house. They threw the golden cups of God into soldiers' sacks like common kitchen pots, and then they burned everything that was left to the ground. By the time Nebuchadnezzar was done, the most sacred address on planet Earth was a pile of ash and rubble. But here is what makes this story different from every other conquest in history. God saw it coming. God allowed it. And God had already left the building before the first torch was thrown. Nebuchadnezzar thought he was stealing the treasures of Israel. He had no idea he was holding objects that would eventually seal the death warrant of his entire empire. This is the story of how the greatest temple ever built was destroyed in a single day. Who took God's treasures? What happened to them in Babylon? And how every single one of them found their way back home, exactly as God promised. To understand the horror of what was lost, you must first understand what had been built. In 957 BC, King Solomon did not just build a religious center, he built the single most ambitious construction project the ancient world had ever attempted. The resources consumed would equal billions of dollars in modern value. 180,000 men labored for 7 years to raise the structure. They quarried stones the size of small houses. But out of reverence for the sacred ground, 1 Kings 6:7 tells us that every stone was shaped at the quarry before it arrived. Not a single hammer or chisel was heard on the building site. It was assembled in absolute reverent silence, as if it were being built by invisible hands. The main sanctuary was 30 meters long and 15 meters high. But it wasn't the size that left foreign kings speechless. It was the interior. Every single centimeter of the walls, from the floor to the ceiling, was covered in solid hammered gold over fragrant cedar of Lebanon. There was not a single stone visible. 10 solid gold lampstands provided the only light reflecting off the golden walls until the room seemed to glow from within. Outside in the courtyard stood the bronze sea, a breathtaking feat of ancient engineering. It was a massive circular basin, 4.5 meters in diameter, holding 44,000 liters of water, resting on the backs of 12 meticulously sculpted bronze oxen. This was where the priests washed, a daily reminder that humanity cannot approach holiness without being cleansed. But all of this, the gold, the bronze, the silver, that the Bible says was as common as gravel in Jerusalem, was just the outer shell. Deep inside the temple, past the golden altar, past the lampstands, was a perfect cube, 10 meters long, 10 meters wide, 10 meters high. It was called the Holy of Holies. There were no windows, no lampstands. It existed in total darkness, because inside was the Ark of the Covenant, a chest made of acacia wood overlaid with gold, containing the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Let this sink in. The actual stone tablets touched by the finger of God on Mount Sinai were inside this box. Above the ark, 2 enormous cherubim carved from olive wood and covered in gold spread their wings until they touched the walls on either side. And in the 3-meter gap between those wings, in the empty air, God was there. This was the center of the Israelite universe. For 4 centuries, they believed that as long as this building stood, as long as the ark remained in the dark, they were untouchable, until a man from the north decided that he was greater than God. The man who destroyed Jerusalem did not see himself as just a king. He saw himself as a force of nature. When Nebuchadnezzar ascended to the throne of Babylon in 605 BC, he didn't just inherit a kingdom, he inherited the most lethal, efficient, and technologically advanced war machine the ancient world had ever seen. Daniel chapter 2 describes Nebuchadnezzar as the head of gold on a statue representing all the empires of human history. This wasn't poetry. It was a diagnosis of his absolute power. His army numbered 180,000 trained killers, but they didn't just rely on numbers. They were masters of psychological terror and military engineering. The Babylonians constructed mobile siege towers over 20 meters high. Imagine the psychological effect of seeing a wooden skyscraper rolling toward your city walls, loaded with archers firing down into your streets. They used enormous battering rams, massive iron-headed tree trunks suspended by chains, operated by dozens of men. The rhythmic, earth-shaking thud of a Babylonian ram striking a gate could be heard for miles. Nebuchadnezzar crushed Assyria. He humiliated Egypt. He dominated the trade routes. Entire cities threw open their gates and surrendered the moment they saw his banners on the horizon. But Jerusalem was different. Jerusalem was a theological insult to Nebuchadnezzar's ego. The Israelites refused to bow to his gods. They claimed that their God, Yahweh, ruled the entire earth from a single golden room on Mount Moriah. To a man who literally built the Hanging Gardens and demanded worship as a living deity, this was an unbearable provocation. He didn't just want Jerusalem's wealth, he wanted to prove that the God of Israel was a myth. But there was a plot twist that Nebuchadnezzar could never have comprehended. Jeremiah 25 records God speaking about the Babylonian king. God doesn't call him an enemy. God calls him Nebuchadnezzar, my servant. The king of Babylon thought he was conquering the world by his own brilliant ambition. He had no idea he was merely a scalpel in the hand of God, being used to cut out the cancer that had infected his people. God did not destroy Jerusalem without a warning. He sent prophet after prophet into the streets of the city, screaming at the kings and the priests that judgment was coming. Idolatry had completely infected the nation. The very temple Solomon built for God was now surrounded by altars to the pagan gods of Solomon's foreign wives. The people were worshipping the building while completely ignoring the God who authorized it. Jeremiah stood in the temple courts and delivered the ultimatum: submit to Babylon, and you will live. Rebel, and this city will be turned into a graveyard. Jeremiah didn't just deliver warnings. He wept in the streets. He begged, and they laughed at him. But King Jehoiakim refused to listen. Jehoiakim believed a lie as old as time. He thought politics could save him from prophecy. He made a secret alliance with Egypt, believing the Pharaoh would protect him. In an act of spectacular arrogance, he simply stopped paying tribute to Babylon. The response was swift, and it was brutal. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar marched on Jerusalem. Jehoiakim died before the army arrived, fulfilling Jeremiah's prophecy that he would be dragged away and buried like a donkey. His 18-year-old son, Jehoiakim, looked over the walls, saw the endless sea of Babylonian tents, and surrendered immediately. Nebuchadnezzar showed no mercy. He deported 10,000 of Jerusalem's best and brightest to Babylon: the craftsmen, the soldiers, the elite. He walked into the temple and stripped out the heaviest golden objects. It was a warning shot. Nebuchadnezzar left the city intact, and he placed a man named Zedekiah on the throne as a puppet king. Zedekiah swore an oath of eternal loyalty to Babylon, and for 8 years he kept it. But pride is a slow poison. Pressured by false prophets and the illusion of safety, Zedekiah repeated the exact same fatal mistake. In 588 BC, he broke his oath. He rebelled. He didn't just break a treaty with a king. Ezekiel 17 tells us that Zedekiah had sworn his oath in the name of God. By breaking it, he made God look like a liar to a pagan king. Nebuchadnezzar's patience snapped. He was done negotiating. He was done deporting. This time, he was coming to erase Jerusalem from the map. In January of 588 BC, Zedekiah looked down from the walls and saw the nightmare return. Only this time, Nebuchadnezzar didn't bother demanding a surrender. He ordered his troops to build a siege wall entirely surrounding Jerusalem. Nobody goes in, nobody comes out. He wasn't going to waste Babylonian lives attacking the massive gates. He had a much cheaper, much more cruel weapon: hunger. The siege lasted 2.5 years, 900 days. Try to comprehend what happens to a city caught in a vice grip for 30 months. First, the grain reserves ran out. Then the meat. Then the water started to dry up in the cisterns. The biblical book of Lamentations, written by an eyewitness to the horror, reads like a post-apocalyptic journal. The hands of compassionate women have boiled their own children. That is not a metaphor. That is a mother in the city of God, in the shadow of the Golden Temple, doing something so unthinkable that the prophet who wrote it could barely hold the pen. This was the city of God, the city of the Golden Temple, reduced to absolute unthinkable depravity just to survive another day. The streets were filled with the dead. The elderly collapsed in the alleys. Children begged for bread, and there was absolutely nothing to give them. The great deception of sin is that it makes you feel free right up until the moment it locks the cage. Zedekiah thought rebelling against Babylon would bring independence. Instead, it brought starvation. Finally, in July of 586 BC, after 2.5 years of unimaginable suffering, the Babylonian battering rams found a weak point. The wall cracked. The sound of stone giving way echoed through the starving city. Zedekiah tried to run. Under the cover of darkness, the king who thought he could outsmart God attempted to flee through a gate near the king's garden. He was captured on the plains of Jericho. 2 Kings 25 records the sickening final moments of his reign. Nebuchadnezzar dragged Zedekiah before him. He forced the king to watch as his own sons were executed in front of him. And then Nebuchadnezzar ordered Zedekiah's eyes to be gouged out. The last thing King Zedekiah ever saw in his life was the blood of his children, the ultimate price of his pride. He was bound in bronze shackles and carried away to die in a Babylonian dungeon in total darkness. But the worst was not what happened to the king. The worst was what happened when they opened the doors to the room where God lived. A month after the city fell, Nebuchadnezzar sent his executioner, a man named Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard. His orders were absolute: dismantle the city. Nebuzaradan walked into the temple courtyard. For centuries, this space had been off-limits to everyone, except ritually purified priests. Now, pagan soldiers with axes and hammers swarmed the holy ground. 2 Kings 25 describes the systematic dismantling of a masterpiece. The mighty bronze pillars, Jachin and Boaz, landmarks of strength, were toppled to the ground, thousands of pounds of bronze crashing against the paving stones. The Bronze Sea, the engineering marvel of Solomon, was smashed into pieces just to make it easier to load onto wagons. The soldiers swept through the sanctuary, throwing the golden censers, the pure gold lampstands, and the offering bowls into coarse burlap sacks as common war loot. Objects that had been consecrated for the worship of the Creator were now trophies for a pagan king. And then they approached the heavy veil protecting the Holy of Holies, the room of absolute darkness, the room where the high priest entered only once a year, terrified he might die if his heart was not pure. The Babylonian soldiers kicked the doors open. They raised their torches into the darkness, expecting to find the most valuable treasure in human history. The room was empty. The Ark of the Covenant was gone. The Bible records the looting of every cup, every spoon, and every basin from the temple, but it says absolutely nothing about the ark being taken to Babylon. It simply vanished from history. To this day, no one knows where it went. Some believe Jeremiah hid it in a cave on Mount Nebo. Some believe it was hidden away in Ethiopia. But the truth is much heavier. God did not allow his throne to become a Babylonian trophy. The ark was gone because the presence was gone. Nebuzaradan gave the final order. The torches were thrown against the cedar walls. The wood that Hiram of Tyre had floated down the coast centuries earlier caught fire. The heat became so intense that the gold lining the walls literally melted, running down into the cracks of the floor. The great roof collapsed inward. Black smoke rose into the sky, a funeral pyre visible for miles. The era of Solomon was over. When you read this history, the natural question is, where was God? How could he let his house burn? The prophet Ezekiel gives us the chilling answer. In Ezekiel chapter 10, before the Babylonians arrived, Ezekiel saw a vision. He saw the glory of God literally lift up from the golden cherubim, move to the threshold of the temple, and then slowly depart from the city, resting on the Mount of Olives. God didn't lose a war. God isn't trapped in a box. When the hearts of the people became completely corrupted, God packed his bags and left the building. Nebuchadnezzar didn't burn down the house of God. He burned down an empty shell. For nearly 5 decades, the golden vessels of Solomon's temple sat in a museum in Babylon, trophies in the temple of the pagan god Marduk. Every time a Babylonian king walked past them, he smiled. Proof that their empire was supreme. Proof that Yahweh of Israel was dead. But God is patient. And God's calendar does not rush for any human empire. In 539 BC, 47 years after the fire, the Babylonian Empire threw a party. Belshazzar, the arrogant grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, decided to throw a massive feast for 1,000 of his lords. But wine wasn't enough for Belshazzar. He wanted blasphemy. Daniel chapter 5 tells us he ordered the sacred golden cups taken from Solomon's temple to be brought into the banquet hall. He, his wives, and his lords drank from the cups consecrated to the living God, raising them in the air to toast to gods of silver, gold, and wood. The divine response was instantaneous. Right in front of the lampstand in the brightest part of the room, fingers of a human hand appeared out of thin air. The king's face went pale. His knees literally knocked together in terror. The floating hand wrote 4 words into the plaster of the wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. The 80-year-old prophet Daniel was brought in to read the sentence. He looked at the trembling king and delivered the verdict of heaven. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Your kingdom is given to the Medes and Persians. That exact night, the unsinkable empire died. Cyrus the Persian had diverted the Euphrates River and marched his army underneath the impenetrable walls of Babylon while the city was drunk. Belshazzar was assassinated before the sun came up. Jerusalem burned, but Babylon was erased. And then God executed the final phase of a plan he had written centuries before. Cyrus the Great took the throne, and his very first act regarding the Jews completely defied human logic. Ezra chapter 1 records the decree, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem." Cyrus went into the treasury of Marduk. He took out the golden cups, the silver bowls, the censers. He packed them up and sent them back to Jerusalem with the exiles. Exactly 70 years, just as Jeremiah had prophesied while he was standing in the streets of a burning city. Every word of God proved true. The exiles returned.